"Uncle, please, our mom didn't wake up today." That's what the little girl said, standing right in front of a stalled tractor on an empty road, holding the hand of someone even smaller than her. Jack Dalton didn't know what made the engine die that evening, but he would thank fate later for picking that exact moment to bring everything to a stop. One minute he was heading home through his back road, dust rising behind the wheels, sweat sticking to his neck under the collar. The next he was staring at four girls, dirt-smudged barefoot, faces pale from hunger, walking toward him like something out of a dream he'd forgotten to have. He stayed seated for a second longer than usual, staring. Then he killed the engine, stepped down, and realized that no grown-up was anywhere in sight. It wasn't normal. Kids that young don't show up alone in the middle of a rural highway. And certainly not all for looking like they'd been walking for hours in the sun. Jack blinked. He wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, not to dry the sweat, but to check if he was imagining this. But they didn't vanish. They came closer. Slowly. The eldest girl had freckles and bruises on her legs. Her socks didn't match. The smallest one had no socks at all. "Where's your family?" Jack asked, not unkindly, just stunned. The oldest didn't answer immediately. Her eyes darted around, checking his posture, his face, maybe even his boots, like she'd been taught to look for signs. Bad signs. Dangerous signs. The others didn't speak. One girl stared at the dirt. The two smallest ones clung to each other like vines on a dying fence. Then the oldest took a half step forward and said the thing no child should ever have to say. "Our mom is sick. We need food. And water." Jack didn't move. He didn't know what to say yet. The words had knocked something loose inside him. She said it like she'd already said it 10 times that day. And no one had helped. Like she didn't even believe asking would work anymore. But she had to keep trying anyway. The sound of a second chance. Jack cleared his throat. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated, eyes flicking to the girls behind her. "Emma," she finally said. "This is Sophie," she pointed. "And the babies are Lily and Leia. They're twins." The twins didn't talk, just held hands and blinked, as if they were trying to disappear. Jack looked at them, all four. Then at his tractor, then back at the girls. "My house is just down that road," he said. "I can get you some food, and maybe we can figure out what's next." Emma said nothing, but she didn't run. That was enough. The walk home is quieter than the fields. It took 20 minutes to walk home. Normally it was a quick ride, but now with the twins' short legs and Sophie clutching Jack's sleeve like it was the only solid thing she had left, it felt longer. He carried Lily in one arm, Leia in the other. He didn't ask permission. He just lifted them when they started stumbling. Emma let it happen, but her eyes stayed sharp. The farmhouse came into view, old, quiet, faded yellow paint chipped by time. Jack hadn't shared that space with anyone in years. Since his father passed, there have been animals outside and silence inside. "It's not fancy," Jack said as they approached. "But it's clean. And it's safe." He pushed the front door open and let them in first. Sophie paused. The twins shuffled inside with her. Emma stood in the doorway a beat longer. She was looking for exits. 4 plates, 1 table, and a lesson in waiting. Jack set the girls down at the kitchen table. He moved slowly, letting them see everything he did. The fridge opened. Eggs. Bread. Cheese. He pulled it out like he was feeding skittish animals. But not because they were wild, because they were scared. He cracked eggs in a pan, toasted bread, and poured milk. He noticed Emma watching his hands. Not the food, not the stove, just his hands. Always checking. Always measuring. When the food was ready, he placed a plate in front of each girl. No fancy silverware. No napkins. Just scrambled eggs and warm toast. And then something happened that made his throat tighten. They didn't touch it. Not one fork moved. Not one crumb was taken. They waited. All 4, hungry, exhausted, eyes fixed on the plate, waited for something. "You can eat," Jack said gently, confused. "It's for you." Emma looked at him, then nodded once. Only then did the others start. Slowly. Not wild, not rude. Just slow. Like they were making the food last before it disappeared again. Children who don't cry anymore. Jack didn't ask questions that night. He didn't ask where they came from, who their mom was. Why no one was looking for them? He didn't need to know all that yet. Some things were more urgent. The bathwater was warm. The shirts he found for them were old, soft, and oversized. He let Emma help her sisters clean up. She didn't want him in the room while they bathed. He understood. When they were done, the guest room, untouched for years, held 4 small bodies, curled into one another like fallen birds. The twins in the middle, Sophie at the edge, Emma on guard. Jack watched from the door. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He just stood there and made sure they all fell asleep. Then he went downstairs, sat on the porch, and stared at the stars. He didn't feel proud. He didn't feel heroic. He felt responsible. You can't unsee children like that, he muttered to himself. A farmhouse that's never been this quiet. The next morning, Jack got up early, same as always. He brewed coffee and opened the fridge. Not much in there, but enough for pancakes. He wasn't sure if kids liked pancakes, but he remembered liking them as a kid. That was good enough. The first one down the stairs was Emma, still wearing that oversized shirt. Still alert. Still carrying the weight of too many months. "Good morning," Jack said. She didn't answer. "Have you ever had pancakes?" he asked, trying to be casual. Emma shrugged. "No." He nearly dropped the bowl. He handed her a spoon. "You stir. I'll cook." She didn't smile. But she stirred. And that was the beginning of everything. A morning that didn't begin with silence. Jack Dalton had lived alone for so long that silence wasn't just part of his mornings. It was the entire routine. He used to wake up before dawn, make his coffee, feed the animals, check the fences, and think about nothing except the next chore. No one spoke. No one called his name. And he liked it that way. At least that's what he told himself. But that morning, something was different. There were footsteps upstairs. Light ones. Then a whisper. Then a quiet thud, like someone bumping into a dresser. He stopped mid-pour, coffee halfway into his mug, listening. He didn't imagine it. They were up. He'd forgotten what that sounded like. A house where someone was awake besides him. And he hadn't even reached for the sugar when the sound came again. Not heavy. Not rushed. Just the creak of floorboards, a door clicking shut, the cautious rhythm of children walking across a hallway that didn't belong to them yet. "They don't trust it's safe yet," Jack muttered. He turned the heat down on the skillet and looked toward the stairs. A child on the threshold. Emma stood at the edge of the kitchen doorway, still wearing the oversized shirt from the night before. Her hair was tangled from sleep, and her eyes were as alert as ever. Not scared, but not relaxed either. It was like her body hadn't figured out that it was allowed to rest now. Jack didn't rush her. He kept whisking pancake batter slowly, and gave her the space to walk in on her own terms. "Coffee smells strong," she said. That surprised him. Not just that she spoke first, but what she said. "It is strong," he replied. "Only way it works." She came a little closer. "Can I try it?" Jack raised an eyebrow. "How old are you again?" 6. "Are you asking for coffee at 6? Emma shrugged. "I used to take a sip. It helped me stay up." That one sentence landed hard. She didn't say it to shock him. It was just her truth. She needed to stay awake. Not to play, not for cartoons, but because no one else could keep watch. Jack didn't argue. He reached for a second mug. He poured a little coffee in, topped it with milk until it was barely tan, and handed it to her. "It's not the real thing," he said, "but you'll feel grown up." She took the mug with both hands, blew on it softly, and took a small sip. "It's warm," she said. "Thank you." She didn't smile, but her shoulders dropped by half an inch. And that was more than enough for Jack. The others waked to a different morning. It didn't take long before more footsteps followed. Sophie showed up next, dragging her feet, rubbing her eyes, her hair sticking up like hay. The twins came in behind her, one hand still in the other's, eyes blinking against the kitchen light. They looked around, unsure of what came next. Emma was already stirring pancake batter. "We're helping," she told them. Sophie perked up. The twins didn't speak, but they moved closer. Jack got to work, fast but not rushed. He adjusted the chairs, set out plates, found clean cups, and poured milk. He didn't own any special dishes for kids, but he tried to make it feel like this was normal. Like this was just what breakfast looked like when there were 4 small people in the house. "These pancakes are round," Sophie said after taking a bite. "But the ones in the cartoons are always stacked." "Want me to stack them?" "Yes, please." Jack smiled. He made a stack. He even added a little butter and syrup on top. The twins stared at their plates, unsure. Emma cut theirs into pieces before she touched her own. Sophie ate like she hadn't had real food in days. "They taste like warm bread in clouds," Sophie said with her mouth full. Jack didn't know what that meant, but it sounded like the highest compliment he'd ever received. A farm that forgot how to feel. When breakfast was over, the house didn't go quiet. That was new. Jack cleaned up while the girls explored slowly. Sophie found the dog first, an old mutt named Rex with one ear that flopped and one eye that always looked confused. Rex let her pet him right away, like he understood something important had shifted. Emma walked around the kitchen, touching nothing, but observing everything. The twins stayed close, never more than 3 feet from each other. There was a kind of rhythm already. A silent code. "Where did you sleep before?" Jack asked gently while drying the plates. Emma didn't answer right away. "Wherever we had to." That was all she said. And Jack didn't press. "What's in a name?" Sophie eventually wandered back into the kitchen, dragging a blanket behind her. "Uncle Jack, where's your wife?" He froze at the sink. "Don't have one." "Did she leave?" "Never had one," he replied. "Why?" Jack chuckled softly. "Nobody asked." Sophie tilted her head. "That's sad." He didn't argue. But then she added, "You can be ours now." He turned. Emma was standing in the doorway. She didn't correct her. Jack just nodded and wiped his hands on a towel. A living room that starts to live. By late morning, the girls had claimed space. Sophie was drawing with an old pen Jack found in a drawer. She used notebook paper torn into pieces. The twins sat by the window with a basket of laundry and turned socks into little puppet games. Emma stood at the edge of the kitchen, watching. "You okay?" Jack asked. She didn't reply. But after a while, she sat on a stool, resting her head on the counter like the weight of the world was catching up. "Do you want to talk about your mom?" he asked softly. Emma lifted her head. "She's sick. We left to find help." "Do you know where she is now?" Emma hesitated. "By the river. Past the trees. She told us not to go far. But we ran out of food." "Can you show me?" "I think so." That was the moment Jack decided he couldn't wait. Preparing for the search. After the girls napped, all 4 tucked onto the old couch, tangled in a quilt that didn't used to matter. Jack stepped outside to make phone calls. He rang Paul Jackson, the sheep farmer 2 miles north. Then Matthew Miller, the man who knew every trail by heart. "I need help," he said simply. "Say when," they replied. Jack made a list. Flashlights, water, blankets, first aid kit, maps, ropes. It was automatic. Like working through a problem in the field. Except this time, the crop was life. He checked the gas in the pickup. He cleaned out the back seat. Then he walked back inside and found Emma awake. "We're going to find your mom," he told her. She looked at him for a long time before whispering, "You mean it?" "I do." A promise in the quiet. Later that night, when the girls were asleep again and the dishes were done, Jack stood at the door to the guest room. He looked at the 4 of them, huddled together under one blanket, their breaths soft and even. Emma's arms stretched over one twin. Sophie's legs tangled with the other. Jack didn't say anything, but something inside him said this wasn't temporary. It didn't feel like charity. It felt like responsibility. The kind you don't walk away from just because the problem stops being loud. He closed the door and walked back downstairs. Outside, the moon lit the edge of the fields. Inside, a man who thought he knew his life sat down at a kitchen table that had 4 more chairs than it used to. He poured himself one last cup of coffee. And this time, it didn't taste like loneliness. Some people knock, he thought. And some just show up hungry, and everything changes. A morning that feels different without anyone saying why. The next morning started slow. But not the same kind of slow Jack was used to. Usually, the sound of the coffee pot bubbling was the only sign the house was alive. But now, it wasn't just the smell of pancakes in the air. It was the soft thump of feet on stairs, the whispered chatter of kids trying not to wake their sisters, and the way sunlight spilled across the kitchen floor like it had a purpose. Jack was up before all of them, flipping pancakes and trying to remember the last time he actually planned a meal for someone else. He couldn't recall. Cooking was usually survival, but this morning, it had a reason. When he turned, Emma was already watching from the doorway. Arms folded, hair messy, face unreadable. "Have you ever thought about adding blueberries?" she asked. He raised a brow. "What? Pancakes? They're better with blueberries." Jack let out a short laugh. "Didn't know you were a food critic." She shrugged, walked over, and helped set the table like she'd done it 1,000 times before. But she hadn't. She was just good at pretending. "You slept okay?" he asked. "Yeah." The babies snore. "That's normal. Means they're resting." Emma didn't smile, but she looked less guarded than the day before. The smell must have reached upstairs because Sophie came bounding in next, barefoot, still in her nightshirt, eyes wide with hope. "Are we having pancakes again?" Jack nodded. "Round ones." She ran to the table like she'd just won the lottery. The first real smile. When Sophie took her first bite, she let out a sound Jack had never heard from her before. Pure happiness. "Oh my gosh," she said through a mouthful. "This is better than the bread Mom used to make." Emma shot her a look, and Sophie went quiet for a second. Jack noticed. "Your mom bakes." "She used to," Sophie replied softly. "When she wasn't tired." There it was again, the truth, hiding in small sentences. Emma focused on her food. The twins arrived last, still holding hands, still blinking like they hadn't decided whether this house was real. Jack gently pulled out chairs for them. They climbed up and stared at their pancakes like they didn't believe they were allowed to eat. "You don't have to wait," he said softly. "It's yours." Emma gave them a nod, and only then did they lift their forks. "You can have more if you want," he added. The twins didn't answer, but their plates emptied fast. Meeting Rex, the old dog with a big heart. After breakfast, Jack opened the back door and whistled. Rex came trotting up from the barn, tail swaying lazily behind him, ears flopping in opposite directions. Sophie froze when she saw him. "Is that a wolf?" Jack laughed. "He's a dog. An old lazy one." Rex sniffed the air, then walked up to Sophie and licked her knee. She squealed and jumped back, then slowly leaned down to pet him. "His tongue is wet." "That means he likes you," Jack said. The twins hid behind Emma at first, but when Rex flopped onto his side and rolled over, tail thumping, even they crept forward to look. Emma crouched beside Rex and extended a hand. He licked her fingers gently. She looked up at Jack. "He's kind." "He is. He doesn't bark much, but he's good at listening." "Like you." Jack wasn't sure what to say, so he just nodded. The barn tour, pigs, chickens, and a horse named Thunder. Jack asked if they wanted to see the animals. Sophie nearly tripped over herself saying yes. The barn was warm, filled with the smells of hay, feed, and something unmistakably farm-like, a little stinky but alive. "This is Thunder," Jack said, pointing to a chestnut horse. "Don't worry. He's loud but not mean." Sophie gasped. "Thunder? That's the coolest name I've ever heard." Emma looked up at the tall horse and reached out slowly. Thunder sniffed her hand, then leaned into the touch. "He likes you," Jack said. "Or he thinks I smell like breakfast," she replied. The girls laughed, real laughter this time. Not the nervous kind. Then they met Spot, the black and white mare. "Why is she called Spot if she has so many spots?" Sophie asked. "Because I'm not very creative," Jack said with a smirk. They kept moving. The pigs came next, 5 of them, huge and loud and rolling around in mud. "They're so fat," Sophie yelled, pointing. "That's not polite," Emma scolded. "But they're happy," Sophie said. The pigs grunted like they agreed. The twins stood back, unsure. Then one pig flopped over and snorted so loudly that Leia shrieked and grabbed Lily. Emma picked up Lily and said something quietly in her ear. Lily calmed instantly. Jack watched that moment. "Has she always been like that?" he asked Emma. "Taking care of others?" Emma didn't look at him when she answered. "Someone had to." The chicken chase and the first game they've played in weeks. Jack opened the coop door, and a dozen chickens rushed out, flapping and pecking and making more noise than seemed necessary. The twins jumped and squealed, but not in fear this time. They started chasing the chickens. The chickens clucked and darted. The twins ran and laughed. Sophie joined in, arms wide, spinning in circles. Emma stood beside Jack, watching. "They look happy," he said. "They are. We don't laugh much anymore." Jack didn't ask why. He didn't need to. But then she added, almost like she was explaining it to herself. "We used to laugh a lot. Before Mom got really tired. Before we stopped having dinner together." Jack didn't say anything. He didn't want to make it worse by pretending it was fine. He just stood beside her while the sun warmed the back of their necks, and the sound of the twins' giggles filled the air, picking peas and dropping walls. After the animals, Jack showed them the garden. It was neat, organized, rows of tomatoes, peas, carrots, and herbs growing in patches he tried to keep alive year-round. "You can help pick peas," he told them. "Just find the ones that feel full." Sophie dove into the task, proud to be trusted. Emma walked slower, but when she reached the vines, her hands moved like she'd done it before. "You've picked vegetables before?" Jack asked. "We had a few plants once. Tomatoes. Some lettuce." "Did they grow?" "Yeah. Until we had to leave." "Where did you go?" Emma looked at him, and for the first time, her voice cracked just a little. "Nowhere really. Just away." She picked 3 peas and handed them to him. "Try these. They're ready." He did. They were perfect. The questions that wait in the background. Later that afternoon, while the little ones were sleeping and Sophie was drawing more animals on the back of junk mail, Jack sat on the porch with Emma beside him. He didn't ask all the questions building up in his mind, but one slipped out. "Is your mom alone right now?" Emma nodded slowly. "We told her not to move. She had a fever. She kept saying she was fine, but she wasn't. We waited. Then we ran out of water, and she couldn't get up anymore. So you left. She said someone would help us." Emma wiped her face with her sleeve quickly, as if embarrassed. "You did." Jack looked at her. "You did the right thing." "It didn't feel right. It felt like giving up." "It was brave," Jack said quietly. Emma stared out over the field, then whispered, "Promise you'll go get her?" "I will." She looked him in the eye. "Promise." "I swear." A house that starts to feel like it belongs to someone again. That night, Jack found the old toolbox and fixed the broken hinge on the screen door. Not because it needed it, but because the sound had started bothering the twins. Every time it slammed, they flinched. He didn't want them flinching anymore. He moved some things around in the guest room, put extra blankets in there, and found a stuffed animal buried in a drawer that he didn't even remember owning. One of the twins hugged it like it was new. He didn't say anything, but it made something in his chest ache. The dinner was simple: scrambled eggs again, toast, and sliced tomatoes from the garden. The kids ate without needing encouragement. Afterward, Sophie ran to him and handed him a folded paper. It was a drawing. For little girls, one big dog, a house, and a man holding a frying pan. "That's you," she said. "Cooking." Jack didn't know what to say, so he just said, "Thank you." She grinned, already chasing the twins down the hall. Traces of a mother, hints of the past. The search begins with a drawing. That evening, after the kids were in bed and the sun dipped behind the barn, Jack stood by the kitchen table looking at Sophie's drawing again. For girls. One dog. One man with a frying pan. And beside the house, drawn in a different color, was something else. A small red door with trees around it. Jack picked up the crayon and tapped it on the table. He remembered Emma's words. "She's by the river. Past the trees. There's a red door." He'd heard kids describe things with wild details before. Pink skies, yellow cows, invisible staircases. But Emma didn't talk like that. She was sharp. Practical. If she said red door, it probably meant something real. Jack folded the paper and slid it into his shirt pocket, asking for help without explaining everything. Next morning, before sunrise, he drove out to the edge of the neighboring farm. He didn't take the kids. He didn't say where he was going. He just left a note and poured cereal into 4 bowls before stepping out. Paul Jackson was already fixing his fence when Jack arrived. "Need your truck?" Paul asked without looking up. Need your eyes? Paul wiped his hands on a rag and met him at the gate. You found the girls? Jack nodded. And their mom? Jack paused. Not yet. But I know where she might be. Paul didn't ask more. That was the kind of man he was. Following a child's map, they started near the edge of the river, where the water curved sharply around a clump of oak trees. Jack walked slowly, scanning the forest line, keeping the drawing in his pocket but replaying it in his head. Red door. Trees. Water. Paul followed behind, not talking, just watching the trail. They found a path, more animal than human, and followed it deeper into the trees. Twigs cracked under their boots. The morning air smelled like damp soil and cedar. Then Jack stopped. You see that? Ahead, half covered in vines, was a small cabin. Wood panels faded, window cracked, and the door, unmistakably red. A cabin that shouldn't be silent. They moved in slowly. Jack raised his hand, knocked twice. No answer. He turned the handle. It creaked open. Inside was a mess. Torn blankets. Empty cans. A smell like mildew and something worse. A pair of shoes by the wall. A dented kettle. And a person on the ground, half covered with a coat. Jack stepped forward. Ma'am. The figure didn't move. He crouched down and touched her shoulder gently. Warm. She groaned. Her face was pale, lips dry, forehead burning. Paul knelt beside her, checked her pulse, looked up. She's sick, but she's alive. Jack nodded. He didn't speak, because now that her face was turned toward the light, he recognized her. The shock that didn't come from the fever. Her name was Leah Monroe. They'd gone to school together, sat next to each other for 3 straight years. She was the girl who always hummed while doing math and picked dandelions during recess. She disappeared when she was 16. One day she was there. The next she wasn't. Some said she ran away. Others said her dad sent her to relatives. No one really knew. Jack never forgot her, but over time, he figured the past was supposed to stay buried. Now here she was. Weak, burning up, curled on a cold cabin floor with nothing left. We need to get her out of here, Jack said. Is she yours? Paul asked quietly. Not yet, Jack replied. But maybe she always was. The ride back isn't just a rescue. They lifted her gently, careful not to jolt her body too much. She didn't wake, didn't speak, but her breathing stayed steady. Paul drove. Jack sat in the back with her head resting on his arm, coat tucked around her shoulders. Every few minutes, she whispered something, not words, just broken syllables. One sounded like Emma. Another like wait. Jack looked out the window at the trees rushing past, and thought about the day the girls showed up. Hungry, barefoot, scared. And now it all made sense. Their strength had a source. Their silence had a reason. Their fear came from watching someone they loved disappear slowly in front of them. Home again, but not like before. When the truck pulled up to the house, the kids were on the porch. Emma froze. Sophie gasped. The twins stepped behind Emma and peeked out. Jack didn't say anything. He just opened the door and stepped out, carrying Leah like she weighed nothing. She's okay, he said. But she needs rest. Emma's eyes filled fast. She didn't cry, not in a loud way. Just one tear that slipped down without permission. You found her. She was never far. Jack carried Leah inside and laid her on the couch, covered her with a blanket. The twins sat at her feet. Sophie held her hand. Emma stayed near the doorway, trembling. Come here, Jack said softly. Emma walked over, slow, unsure. He placed her hand on her mother's forehead. She'll get better. She just needs time. Emma didn't speak, but she didn't let go either, caring for the woman they didn't expect. The next few hours were quiet but full. Jack made soup, chicken with soft carrots and noodles, the kind his mother used to swear could fix anything. Emma helped spoon it into her mother's mouth, bit by bit. No rush. Paul stayed long enough to bring extra firewood, then left without needing thanks. Sophie drew a new picture. This time the house had a woman inside. The twins sat near the couch and played quietly with buttons from Jack's sewing drawer. The house didn't feel like it used to. It felt warmer, messy, more real. She's going to need medicine, Jack said. Emma nodded. We'll find it. A night with no plans, just presents. That evening, no one asked what tomorrow would bring. Leah stirred a few times, mumbled things that didn't make sense, but her breathing was steady. Her hands were warm. Emma didn't sleep in the guest room. She stayed on the floor beside the couch, wrapped in a blanket, one hand on her mom's shoulder. Sophie curled up beside Rex, using his belly as a pillow. The twins shared Jack's recliner, knees tucked in, heads on each other's shoulders. Jack sat at the kitchen table again, looking at them all. He didn't need to plan the next step yet. Right now they are together. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. Some people wait their whole lives to belong somewhere, he thought. And some just knock on the wrong door and end up in the right place. The search gets real, and secrets start slipping out. A new morning with the same worry. Jack barely slept that night. He'd drift off in short bursts, only to wake up and check the living room. Leah didn't move much, just shifted every now and then. The fever was still there, but her breathing was steady. At sunrise, he stood on the porch with a cup of coffee that had gone cold in his hand. He didn't care. His mind was somewhere else. Behind him, the house had more life than it used to. Rex barked once. A cupboard slammed. One of the twins giggled in her sleep. It was a new kind of background noise. Something alive, something that meant the quiet wouldn't eat him whole anymore. But there was still a problem he couldn't shake. Leah needed more than soup and blankets. He had no idea how long she'd been in that cabin, or what kind of infection she might be fighting. He wasn't a doctor. He knew how to splint a broken leg on a calf, not treat pneumonia in a woman who hadn't eaten in days. Emma appeared behind him, hugging her arms. She's still not waking up much, she said. Jack nodded. We need help, he replied. The kind I can't give here. Making the call no one wants to make. He stepped into the hallway, pulled the cordless phone off the charger, and dialed. The clinic was 20 miles out, a tiny building in a forgotten corner of the county. Dr. Helen Sharp ran it with 2 nurses and more patients than Jack thought humanly possible. Dr. Sharp speaking. It's Jack Dalton. I need someone to come out here. You all right? I'm fine. But she's not. He explained as much as he could without dragging the girls' names into it too deeply. Helen didn't press. We'll be there by noon. Thank you. Jack, she added. If she's running a high fever and hasn't eaten properly in days, this may not be a simple fix. I know. He hung up and leaned his head against the wall. The twins wake up to something familiar. By the time the sun had fully risen, the girls were awake. The twins had wrapped Rex in a towel like a baby and were feeding him dry cereal from their palms. That's not his usual breakfast, Jack told them. He doesn't mind, Leah said. Emma was spooning warm oatmeal into her mother's mouth again. Leah opened her eyes for a few seconds this time. Jack noticed. She recognized me, Emma whispered. For a second. Good, Jack said. That's something. Sophie brought over a flower she'd picked from the edge of the yard and tucked it into the blanket around her mom's shoulders. She used to put flowers in her hair every Sunday, she said, even when we didn't go anywhere. Jack nodded but didn't speak. There were 100 questions sitting in his chest. None of them urgent enough to ask yet. The doctor arrives, and not quietly. Just before noon, dust rose in the distance. Jack walked out to greet the small silver truck bouncing down the dirt road. Helen Sharp stepped out, already pulling a bag from the passenger seat. She wasn't tall, but her voice always carried like she was. Is she inside? She asked. Couch. Fever. Weak. Won't eat unless Emma feeds her. Helen was through the front door before he finished. The kids sat together on the stairs watching. She did her job quietly, efficiently. Checked Leah's pulse, took her temperature, looked at her tongue, tapped her chest with the back of her fingers. This is past the point of cough syrup and rest, she said. She's dehydrated, probably fighting an untreated infection. Might be pneumonia. We'll start fluids. Antibiotics. I'll need to come back every day for a week. Jack nodded. Whatever it takes. Helen looked at him, then glanced toward the children. Are you doing all this alone? Not really, he said. They've been doing most of the hard parts. Tension in the living room, trust in the kitchen. Later that afternoon, While Leah dozed again under fresh blankets, Jack boiled water for tea and handed a mug to Helen. Have you ever treated someone who disappeared for a decade and came back with 4 kids and no warning? He asked. Once. But he didn't have pancakes waiting. Jack smiled for the first time that day. She's not just a stranger, he said. We knew each other. Long time ago. I figured, Helen replied. You only make this kind of effort when there's history. They sat in silence for a minute. Outside, the kids were drawing in the dirt with sticks. Rex laid flat beside them, half asleep. If she hadn't been found this week, she wouldn't have survived, Helen said. I know. You got enough left in you to help her heal? Jack didn't answer immediately. Then he said, I think maybe helping her is the only thing that's kept me from disappearing too. Something in the eyes. That night, Leah opened her eyes again. Just for a few seconds. But this time they weren't glazed over. She blinked, scanned the room, found Emma and whispered her name. Emma jumped up. Mom, you okay? Leah rasped. You're here. You're safe. Leah nodded faintly. Her hand found Emma's cheek and stayed there. Then her eyes drifted to Jack. They widened for just a breath, like something came back to her. She didn't say his name, but the way she looked at him said enough. Jack stepped forward. You're home, he said quietly. She smiled barely, but it was the first real smile she'd shown in days. A night that feels like a turn in the road. That evening, after the doctor left, and the girls settled into their now familiar spots, twins in the recliner, Sophie curled near the fireplace, Emma in a chair next to her mother, Jack stepped outside and sat on the porch steps. The stars were brighter than usual. Or maybe he was just noticing them for the first time in a while. He didn't say much. Didn't need to. But there was one truth sitting with him on that porch. You don't always choose who walks into your life, he thought. But you can choose whether they stay. And as far as he was concerned, they were staying. Her name was Leah, and she remembered everything. A quiet room. But her eyes are finally clear. By the time the sun came through the window again, Leah's fever had broken. Not completely, but enough for her to sit up without help. She looked thinner than she should have. Her face was pale and soft around the eyes, but her lips weren't dry anymore, and she could speak without whispering. Emma was right there, still half asleep in the chair next to her. You stayed up? Leah asked weakly. Emma nodded. I didn't want to miss it if you opened your eyes. Leah reached over, touched her daughter's cheek with fingers that felt like they'd lost their strength. But the love in her touch hadn't faded at all. You're so strong, she whispered. Jack stood a few steps away, not sure if he should interrupt. But Leah's eyes turned toward him. Jack. It wasn't a question. More like someone recognizing a face from a dream they weren't sure was real. Yeah, he replied. I'm here. The past comes back with one name. It took a few more minutes before she could sit all the way up. Jack brought her a glass of water and a folded towel to lean on. You've been out for a while, he said. The girls did what they could. Emma got them here. I just helped them stay. Leah looked around the room. The couch. The firewood. The drawings taped to the fridge. The familiar yellow curtains she'd once made fun of when they were teenagers. Your house hasn't changed much, she said. Neither have you, he replied. She smiled, tired but real. I doubt that. Emma stepped out to let her mom rest. And now it was just the two of them. Finally face to face, without any noise, without distractions. I thought you moved away, Jack said. Back then. Nobody ever said where. You just vanished. Leah looked down at her hands. We were forced out. My dad got into some trouble. Real bad trouble. We had to leave overnight. I wasn't even allowed to say goodbye. You were 16. Yeah. And scared. Why she disappeared. And what happened next? Leah took another sip of water and rested her head against the couch. He moved us to Texas. New names. New school. Nothing felt real. I lost everything I cared about, including you. Jack sat on the edge of the chair across from her. I waited for you, he said. At the library. For 2 weeks. You used to meet me there every Thursday. I know, she said. I cried for days after we left. My mom said we'd go back, but we never did. And now I'm a mother. A mother who failed them for a while. Jack shook his head. You didn't fail. You got them this far. I got sick. I left them alone. And they came looking for help. That's not failure. That's survival. Leah didn't speak for a while, but she reached across the space between them and placed her hand on his. The father they never talk about. Later that day, when the kids were outside feeding the chickens, Jack sat with Leah again while she tried to eat a little soup. Where's their father? He asked gently. She stared at the spoon for a long time before answering. Gone. Long gone. Walked out. More like disappeared on purpose. He hurt you. Yes, she said plainly. In more ways than I'll ever let the girls know. Jack didn't push further. You ever think of going back to your folks? They passed. And before that, they made it clear I'd made my choices. Jack nodded. So it's just you and them. And you, she said, barely audible. Jack glanced at her. She didn't take it back. A meal that finally feels like a family table. That night, Leah sat at the kitchen table for the first time. Emma sat next to her. Sophie across. The twins shared a chair between them, balancing slices of bread and scrambled eggs. Jack brought over bowls and juice and the last few ripe tomatoes from the garden. This is the first time I've seen them eat without worrying about the next meal, Leah said. They deserve that. So do you. It wasn't romantic. Not yet. But it was real. A kind of peace that neither of them had felt in years. You saved them, she added. They saved me first, Jack said. One question that's harder than the rest. After dinner, the girls ran outside to play tag in the field. Jack and Leah stayed on the porch, the wooden boards warm from the day's sun. What are you going to do now? Jack asked. I don't know, she admitted. I don't have a plan. No money. No ID. Nothing. Just 4 daughters who deserve more than I can give them. Jack looked out at the girls. You've already given them everything that matters. Not enough. Then stay. Leah looked at him unsure. Here, she asked. Why not? Because it's your home. And now it's theirs too. A night with fewer walls between them. Before bedtime, Leah tucked the twins in herself. She sang to them, a quiet song with no words, just a tune they remembered. Sophie asked for another story. Emma sat beside her mom and just watched her like she couldn't believe she was real. Jack stood in the hallway listening. And for once, there wasn't anything left to fix. No emergency. No mess to clean up. Just people breathing in the same space, finally safe. Sometimes, Jack thought, the people who vanish aren't lost. They're just waiting for the right reason to come home. And maybe that reason had been 4 little girls walking up a dirt road, looking for pancakes and finding something bigger. A home rekindled, one quiet moment at a time. Her first full morning on her feet. Leah didn't rush it. She didn't need to. That morning, she stood up on her own for the first time in days. No one clapped. No one cheered. But Emma watched from the doorway with her hand pressed to her heart, like she didn't even realize she was doing it. Jack was outside splitting wood when Leah stepped into the kitchen, barefoot and pale but upright. You're pushing it, he said, glancing at her through the open window. I've been lying down too long, she replied. I need to feel the floor again. He didn't argue, just brought in a chair, wiped it clean with a towel, and helped her sit at the table. The morning light hit her hair, and for a second, she didn't look like a woman recovering. She looked like someone remembering how to live, cooking for the first time since everything fell apart. After breakfast, Leah stood by the stove and made toast. That's all. But to her it felt like lifting a truck. Her hands shook a little. Not from fear, from the weight of doing something normal again. You want help? Jack asked. No, she said. Let me do something small on my own. She dropped one piece. Burnt another. Sophie cheered anyway. Mom's cooking again. Emma didn't say much, but she smiled when Leah handed her a slice. Not because the toast was perfect, but because it existed. This used to be nothing, Leah said. Now it feels like everything. A closet full of nothing but possibility. Later that day, Jack cleared out the old guest room closet. There wasn't much in it. A few coats, an old fishing rod, a box of holiday lights that hadn't worked in years. He folded what was useful, packed the rest in a storage bin, and made space for something else. Clothes. Drawings. A few baby shoes the twins had outgrown but refused to throw away. "You're not planning for visitors anymore," Leah said, standing at the door with a fresh blanket folded over her arm. "No," Jack replied. "I'm planning for people who are staying." She didn't reply, just placed the blanket on the bed like she belonged there. Leah starts earning again her way. By the middle of the week, Leah asked Jack if she could start helping with chores. "I'm not going to sit around while you keep everything running," she said. "I can work. Maybe not heavy lifting yet, but I've got hands." Jack gave her a look. "You're recovering. Rest matters. So does dignity." He didn't argue again. She started small, collecting eggs, rinsing vegetables, wiping down counters. Then she noticed Jack's receipts scattered near the barn. Feed orders, vet bills, equipment repairs. "You track this with pencil and paper?" "Works fine. I used to do inventory at a diner. Let me help you sort this better." By the end of the day, the receipts were alphabetized, stapled, and stored in folders. Jack looked at the shelf, then at her. "That would have taken me a month." "You're welcome," she said. And she meant it. A trip to town that felt bigger than groceries. 3 days later, they made a trip to town. Not for medicine this time. Not for help. Groceries. Simple things: milk, soap, flour, crackers the twins liked, a pack of pencils for Sophie. They went in Jack's old truck. The twins sang half a song on repeat. Sophie kept asking how big the store would be. Emma sat beside Leah, one hand wrapped around her mom's fingers. It was Leah's first time walking into a public place since she'd collapsed near the river. She wore a faded green dress and borrowed shoes. Nothing fancy, but she held her head up. "People might stare," she whispered to Jack. "Let them," he replied. Inside, no one said a word. They just shopped. But Leah caught her reflection in the freezer door. Tired eyes, strong shoulders, for girls trailing behind her, and she didn't look away. That meant something. Jack gets used to noise, and starts to miss it when it's quiet. One night, Jack was fixing the porch light. He dropped a screw, cursed under his breath. Then I heard laughter behind him. Sophie, Emma, and the twins had turned the living room into a dance floor. They were playing music from an old speaker. Leah was sitting on the couch, tapping her knee to the rhythm, laughing, full-on head-back laughing, as the girls made up moves and argued over whose turn it was. Jack froze at the door, because it hit him. This wasn't his house anymore. It was theirs, and he didn't mind one bit. "Noise is just a sign that life is happening," he muttered. "And I'll take life over silence any day." A routine that doesn't feel like a trap. By the second week, things had rhythm. Leah made breakfast. Jack fixed things. The girls fed the animals. In the evenings, Jack read aloud from an old book Emma had pulled off a shelf. Leah helped the twins brush their teeth. Sophie drew pictures and taped them all over the fridge. One night, Emma asked the question no one else had dared. "Are we staying?" Jack looked at Leah. She looked at him. "If it's okay with Jack," Leah said softly, "I think we could." He nodded. "It's more than okay." Building forward, not just fixing what's broken. They didn't sit down and plan their future like a spreadsheet. That's not how life works. Instead, they did one thing at a time. Leah made a list of things the girls needed. Proper shoes, school supplies, jackets for colder nights. Jack called a friend in town and asked how to get the girls enrolled in school without papers. Leah started cooking more, cleaning less like a guest and more like a homeowner. Jack added hooks by the door for their coats. Little things, but they added up. The final test, a visitor from the county. The test came on a Wednesday morning. A white car with a county plate pulled into the driveway. Emma saw it first. "That's a social worker's car," she said. Her voice went flat. Leah came out of the kitchen, drying her hands. Jack stood on the porch, his jaw tight. The woman stepped out with a clipboard. She wasn't rude, but she wasn't smiling either. "I'm here about the girls," she said. Jack didn't panic. He let her inside. Offered her coffee. Let her talk to Leah. To the kids. To him. She took notes. Asked questions. Looked around. After an hour, she stood and said, "You've created something rare here. I'll make sure it's protected." Then she left. Just like that. Leah's knees nearly buckled when the car disappeared down the road. Jack caught her elbow. "It's all right," he said. "We're all right." And for the first time, Leah believed it. The questions that waited years. When everything feels normal, but nothing is. By now the house had a flow. The morning started with clatter. Cereal bowls. Spoons. A spilled cup of milk. Rex scratching at the door. Jack grumbles at a loose cabinet hinge again. The kids bickered over who got to brush the horse. Leah moved through the kitchen like she'd never been sick. And Jack caught himself smiling in the mirror, which wasn't something he used to do. But under it all, there was a silence that hadn't been dealt with. Some things hadn't been said. And everyone knew it. Especially Emma. She saw everything. Took note of the glances between her mom and Jack. Noticed when Leah winced while lifting the basket. Watched Jack stare at the paperwork for the girls' school enrollment. And tap his pen 5 times before writing anything. "Is it okay if things are good?" she finally asked her mom one evening, while folding socks beside her. Leah looked up. "What do you mean? Is it okay to feel safe? Like really safe? Even if we didn't before?" Leah dropped the shirt she was folding. "You've never had to ask that. You should have always known." Emma didn't cry. She just nodded. "But we didn't." The talk no mother wants to have. That night, when the girls were asleep and Jack was cleaning tools in the shed, Leah walked out onto the porch and sat beside him. "I need to tell you something. And it's not easy," she said. Jack didn't interrupt. He wiped his hands on a cloth and gave her the space to speak. "After we left Texas, things got bad fast. I was working 2 jobs. She paused. The girl's father. He was mean when no one was around. I stayed too long. I thought I could handle it." "Did he ever hurt them?" "Not with hands. But with words. With fear. I took them and left before it got worse. I didn't have a plan. Just a bag of clothes and the food in the pantry. We slept in motels' back seats. Eventually, I found that cabin. The girls were too young to understand much then." Jack nodded. "But you held them together anyway." "Barely. I told them stories every night. About a safe place where they'd grow up and never feel scared. About pancakes and porch swings and someone who wouldn't leave when things got hard." Jack looked at her. "I think you brought them to that place." Leah's throat tightened. "I didn't expect it to be real." A storm, and a small breakdown that needed to happen. The rain came suddenly that night, fast and hard. The twins were scared. Thunder cracked open the sky, and they cried, thinking the roof would cave in. Sophie grabbed a blanket and hid under the table. Emma froze in the hallway, staring at the storm, holding her breath. Leah tried to calm them, but she was trembling too. Jack found Emma and knelt beside her. "It's just rain," he said softly. "I promise this house doesn't leak. You're safe." Emma shook her head. "That's not what I'm afraid of." "Then what is it?" "I'm afraid it won't last. That she'll leave. That we'll lose this." Jack pulled her into a hug. "You're not losing anything. You don't know that." "I do. Because I've built a life that was too quiet for too long. And I'm not letting it go now that it finally sounds like something worth waking up to." Emma let go then. Of the weight, the silence, the years of being a parent when she should have been a kid. She cried hard and loud, and Jack didn't rush her. He let her cry like it was the most important thing she could do. Because it was. The fire doesn't go out, and neither do the promises. Leah sat beside Jack later, wrapped in a quilt. The rain had slowed. The girls were finally asleep again, Rex curled at their feet. "I never thought I'd be the one needing saving," she said. "No one plans for it," Jack replied. "But everyone needs it eventually." "Why didn't you ask more questions? Why didn't you walk away when it got messy?" Jack looked at her. "Because when you've been lonely long enough, you recognize the same kind of quietness in someone else. And you either let them go, or you open your door." Leah leaned her head on his shoulder. No more words needed. Enrolling the girls, and saying it out loud. The next day, Jack drove Leah and the girls into town to fill out the school forms. The building was small, only 2 classrooms and 1 hallway. But it had a library, a playground, and a kind secretary with soft eyes who didn't ask too many questions. "I'll need to talk to the county again," the secretary said. "But we'll make room. They're welcome here." Emma asked Leah quietly, "Are we really doing this?" "Yes," Leah said. "We're starting over." Emma's hand tightened around hers. Jack stood behind them, watching a different kind of foundation settle. This wasn't temporary anymore. This was home. Sophie came running into the kitchen later that week with a paper in her hand. "I made you a quote," she said proudly. She held it up. It said, "You don't always choose your family, but you can always build one." Sophie, age 7. Leah taped it to the fridge. It stayed there for years. A morning with no more hunger. 1 month later, the house wakes up its own way. It had been exactly 4 weeks since the day 4 little girls stood in front of a stalled tractor on a dusty road, asking for help with empty hands and tired eyes. Now those same 4 girls woke up to the smell of coffee and toast, not fear and silence. The twins rushed down the stairs, already arguing about which one got to wear the purple socks. Sophie chased Rex around the porch barefoot while holding a half-eaten banana. Emma sat at the kitchen table with a pencil in hand, working through a school worksheet like it was nothing new. And Leah? Leah was at the stove. She wasn't shaky anymore. She didn't need help getting out of bed. Her voice had its weight back, her hands moved with calm purpose, and her laugh, which had once felt like it came from another life, now filled the corners of the room like it belonged there all along. Jack stood by the window, coffee in one hand, toolbox in the other, watching it all. "You look like someone who's not sure how he got so lucky," Leah said, glancing at him. "I don't remember signing up for this," Jack replied. "Would you go back?" "Not a chance." A backyard full of joy, not just chores. Later that day, Jack and Emma planted tomatoes out back. Emma wore gloves that didn't quite fit, and Jack showed her how to press the soil down firm but not tight. "Like packing a suitcase?" she asked. "Kind of. Except it's for roots, not shirts." Sophie ran past them with a watering can, shouting something about the chickens needing a bath. "She knows they're not people, right?" Jack asked. "She doesn't care," Leah called from the porch. "They listen to her better than we do." The twins were lying in the grass nearby, counting clouds. One pointed at a shape and said it looked like a pancake. The other disagreed and said it was clearly a tractor. It was ridiculous. And it was perfect. A farm that's not just Jack's anymore. There were new things on the walls now. Drawings. Notes. A calendar with school days marked. A list of favorite meals handwritten by the girls. Even the old coat hooks near the door had new names scribbled above them. Emma. Sophie. Lily. Leah. Jack added one more. Leah. "I didn't earn a hook yet," she teased. "You earned the whole wall," he replied. Out in the barn, they started storing extra eggs. Leah found a woman in town who ran a local market and wanted to buy weekly. That meant income, and it came from her work. "I didn't think I could ever contribute again," Leah told Jack one evening. "You didn't have to," he said. "But you did anyway." Letters from the school, and one from the county. The girls had been in school for 2 weeks when a letter came. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't a request. It was a note from the county. Home environment deemed safe and stable. No intervention required. Leah stared at the paper for a long time. "It's the first time someone put safe next to our names," she whispered. Jack didn't say anything. He just framed it, hung it on the hallway wall, between Sophie's drawing of Rex and a scribbled family tree that had Jack, not Dad but okay, written in shaky crayon at the top. An ordinary dinner that meant everything. That Friday night, they all sat at the table. Spaghetti, garlic bread, nothing fancy, but everyone had a seat. Everyone had a plate. And no one had to ask permission to eat. Halfway through the meal, Leah cleared her throat. "Girls, I want to say something." They looked up, forks midair. "You're allowed to feel happy now. That doesn't mean we forgot anything hard, but it does mean we're not stuck there anymore." Emma reached across the table and squeezed her mom's hand. "We're not going anywhere," she said. Jack watched the exchange and felt something settle in his chest. Not relief, not pride, something quieter. Peace. A porch light that stays on. That night, after the kids were in bed and Leah was brushing her hair by the window, Jack stepped onto the porch and looked out at the dark fields. No headlights. No wind. Just stars. And the porch light he'd replaced last week, now working without a flicker. Leah joined him a moment later, a blanket draped over her shoulders. They didn't say much, but after a while Leah leaned against him. "I was so scared when I first saw you again," she admitted. "Why?" "Because I thought I didn't deserve help from someone who remembered who I used to be." Jack looked at her. "You didn't just show up in my life. You reminded me what life actually looks like." She smiled, and then she said something she hadn't said in years. "Thank you for saving me." Jack shook his head. "You walked through the fire. I just had a roof when you came out the other side." One last morning, and a new tradition. The next morning, Jack woke up to laughter outside. He opened the window. Emma was hanging laundry. Sophie was chasing Rex. The twins were sitting on the back steps, sharing a biscuit. And Leah was humming the same tune she used to sing when they were 16 and walking home from school, 10 feet apart but thinking the same thing. Jack closed the window and let the sound stay in the house. Then he wrote a note and stuck it to the fridge. "Sunday is for pancakes. No exceptions. Jack." The girls found it an hour later. And just like that, a new tradition began. Not because they needed it to survive, but because they had finally learned how to stay.